Hello and welcome to another Cliff Reviews Art House. This time I'm reviewing the film Peeping Tom, directed by Michael Powell. Now this is a very special review because I'm actually making the review on the location of the first scene from the film. This passageway behind me is the passageway from the first scene where Mark propositions a sex worker, takes her down this passage and they go in the doorway on the right. So it's very exciting to have this unusual opportunity to be doing the review of a film actually on the set. Now in my review of the Powell and Pressburger documentary Made in England, I summarise my attitude to Powell and Pressburger films generally. I think overall these films haven't aged well. They do feel dated, but when you look at them through the eyes of the day, they still feel really innovative and often very exciting visually. Peeping Tom was only made by Michael Powell, and it does not fall within that summary of the Powell and Pressburger films. This is a fantastic film. It's innovative, it's visually exciting, but it's also not just pushing boundaries, it's removing them. It's as good as some of the Hitchcock classics like Psycho and Rear Window. And it also reminded me of Michael Haneke's Benny's Video. It's the story of a photographer, Mark, who works at a film studio in the day and moonlights as a photographer. Today, he would be taking pornographic photos. We learn that Mark has childhood trauma. His father was fascinated with studying fear in children. And Mark also develops an obsession with filming moments of absolute terror, the moment before a person dies. He uses a hidden camera to record the final moments of his victims as he murders them. Mark's life becomes complicated by a kind of love story. He builds up this slow relationship with Helen, his next-door neighbour. She gradually uncovers the truth about him, and the first time she sees one of his films, we don't actually see the film, we only see her face, and I love this technique. This film is uncomfortable, it's seedy, it's grubby, it's sordid, but it's so well made. Scorsese describes Peeping Tom as a horror movie with no blood, and the object of the terror is the film camera, and this is actually a great description. It's not just a film about a psychologically disturbed person. Mark's involvement in the porn industry and the respectable customer buying photographs implicates the audience, I think. It kind of creates a grey area between that and Mark's behaviour. It must have been really disturbing for the 1960s. I think it's disturbing for today, but it's spot on in terms of identifying more sordid behaviours and fantasies beneath our respectable exteriors. How many of us are actually voyeurs to a lesser or greater extent? I think this is the question that Peeping Tom is asking us. It's really nuanced. Although Mark does terrible things, he's not really shamed. Helen is actually quite compassionate towards Mark. She isn't horrified, even though it's clear that the films and the recordings are horrific. Michael is shown quite sympathetically, and overall there's a feeling of sadness more than condemnation. But I can see why people didn't like it in the early 1960s. It's supposed to be uncomfortable, and it's absolutely brilliantly done. But it's so much more than this. The whole film is set around cameras and studios. It's a film about filmmaking. I think it's commenting on power dynamics and ethical considerations between filmmaker and subject, and also the psychological implications of creating and consuming media. This film doesn't feel like a very positive outlook. I think Powell is really pessimistic about the camera and film here, and the filmmaker's detachment from reality. The film is also just a good thriller, a horror film, a film about a serial killer, and I love the climax of the film. The narrative arc is really good and the story ends well. Despite that, this film had a really negative reception from the critics, which was devastating both for the film and for Michael Powell. His career was basically over. The film was effectively withdrawn. It was released around the same time as Hitchcock's Psycho, which is also shocking. But I think a difference with Psycho is that it didn't implicate the viewer in the same way that Peeping Tom does. We're more detached from Norman Bates than we are from Mark, I think. I think Peeping Tom challenges viewers to reflect on their own voyeurism, so it's much more uncomfortable than Psycho. Of course, the attitude to Peeping Tom has now changed, and this is in no small part to people like Martin Scorsese, who discovered it and ensured that his profile was raised. It's now regarded as a groundbreaking work, far ahead of its time. This would be a provocative film today. I really appreciate this film. It's daring, it's courageous, it's psychologically complex. Lastly, it's a Michael Powell film, so visually it's totally compelling. All in all, I could not recommend this film highly enough. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.